Caddis Maximus here, this time with a review of the 7-piece 6-inch flute Harbor Freight Bauer premium ship auger bit set. This is a 7-piece set, and surprisingly enough, it was $20 on the shelf, where Harbor Freight's standard grade Warrior 6-inch 7-piece set was $17. So I definitely would recommend these over the standard Warriors. This is actually not a bad price for a 7-piece set like this. The Harbor Freight Bauer and Hercules reciprocating saw blades are not price competitive, and they really need to evaluate that. I won't recommend against those because they'll, you know, when they're more expensive than Milwaukee, Lennox, Bosch, or Diablo blades, no way. So I think either they're being just a little disingenuous, or they're just need to work through some pricing issues on those items. These auger bits are much more competitive. A 7-piece, more premium grade auger or ship auger bit set is a pretty good deal at $20. The primary difference between these and the Warriors is they'll have a slightly better grind, and then they do have a higher quality steel. Now the grinds aren't the best, but these are a center rod type. Center rod means that it looks like there's a metal bar right through the middle of the bit, and that is actually something that was invented well over a century ago, and just helps provide a little bit of additional rigidity, although manufacturers are kind of back and forth about that. We have an Irwin here, which is actually who bought the original patent for the center bit or the center rod auger, but we can see that the Irwins now are cheap. They're much cheaper than even the Harbor Freight Warrior. In my opinion, the Irwin auger bits now are some of the very lowest quality, most poorly made auger bits available. They're actually terrible. They're worse than Harbor Freight's ever been. Never buy Irwin ship augers. We do have the DeWalt's, which aren't a center line, but they are very heavy duty. And the one argument against a center rod is that you just get a little bit more area in the flutes to hold chips. They don't get clogged up quite as easily. We can tell that the grind is a hollow grind because if you grab a hold of these bits like this, you can feel just a little bit of grab. It's not super consistent. It would seem that up here the grind is variable. It's a little sharper down here, so that would be one comment. It isn't perfect. If we do go back and take a look at the absolute cutting edges, the actual cutting edge here, and we'll get a few different auger bits in this setup. This is one of the original Warrior. This is just a short one, but they're the same when the longer 6-inch. And we can see that it's okay, but it has a real sharp edge. It's real thin, so it's going to wear out real quick right there on the corner and then start chewing up the sidewall, and you'll have to resharpen that fairly often. We can also see that just the thickness of the wedge right there is really, really thin. Here's the Irwin. It has a better grind, but it's just so poorly made that when they ground it, they just chopped really deeply into that bit, almost half. You can see that it's more than halfway through, and that does run the risk of breaking that tip off. It's really pretty disappointing. When we compare these other brands, this one I think is a Makita, but I'm not sure, but it has a squared off corner where it has a little bit of additional support on the side. The DeWalt Nail Eater also has the same aspect, and so that provides just a bunch of extra support and meat right there at the cutting edge, and it gives you a little bit wider edge and provides just a little bit more smoothing and cutting action on the side of the hole. We can see that the Harbor Freight the Bauer does not have what would be a Nail Eater or a reinforced cutting edge with that squared, but we can see that the grind is pretty good and that they were actually pretty careful because they didn't actually dive into the body of the auger bit. And then one last thing is that they do have this plastic coating. These really, for some reason, remind me a lot of the Milwaukees, just because they're red and then they have that coating in there. And it does indeed feel pretty slick, so that ought to help the chips auger themselves out and slide up the flutes without getting jammed quite so easily. They are still a little bit more consumer intended just because, like the Irwins, they do have hex shanks, but they're all 3/8 or smaller, so they can fit in most drills, where the real heavy-duty professional ones are meant for half-inch drills, and so they have 7/16 shanks there, or on the more modern ones, it's a quick-release 7/16 shank. I do not know why my camera is having such a hard time today, but we'll just do a fixed focus here. And so we can see that on the more premium grades, you do get a much thicker and heavier duty shank, and it just prevents it from wanting to get bent because you're working with such long bits. So anyway, I'm going to do a couple of little tests, but so far, actually not bad. For 20 bucks, these would be just a great general use set, even for service technicians, etc. They do have some issues where they're handling them. Like you can see right here, there's some dinging and dents. But overall, the grind and everything on these is actually not that bad. Really, for $3 more than the same set in the Warrior brand, it's actually no brainer. These are significantly better than Harbor Freight's cheap ones. They may not be quite as good as real premium, and even the DeWalt's aren't the best. The Milwaukee's are really good. And some of the other brands are also really nice, but they're also significantly more expensive. So I do appreciate this. I think Harbor Freight has done a much better job of at least pricing these in balance with the increase in manufacturing quality, as well as having a higher grade steel that's going to be a little bit more heat resistant and not dull quite as quickly. So I'm going to do a little drilling demonstration test, and I'll go ahead and do that between the really terrible Irwin, the DeWalt, and then of course one of the Bowers, and we'll just take a look at the holes just to see if there's any real difference in drilling speed, which will probably be about the same. But we'll look at the quality, the finish of the hole to see if we can see much of a difference there. Here we are. I'm going to start off with the Irwin. We're going to be drilling at 450 RPM because even though it's a bit slow for 7/8 auger, the difference in the quality of the grind and the geometry, etc., will be more apparent at a slower speed. Oh, and somebody had commented about the metal handle on this DCD 996. None of the DeWalt brushless drills came with metal handles. It's really unfortunate. They are plastic and they're not very good. The last time that they had metal handles was at the top of the line brush drills like the DCD 985, 980. That's the drills that you'd look, the side handle model drills that had the metal ones. Here we go. And now for the Irwin, I'll get a little more light on there. We can see a little bit more brightly. Get my foot positioned. That was actually the DeWalt, not the Irwin. The DeWalt did struggle a little bit more, or you could hear the drill working harder, just because the DeWalt has a tip designed to be able to run into and cut nails. So it's much heavier duty, but it's going to be a little bit more blunt. Now finally for the Bauer. And here we are. Here's the Irwin, and it actually didn't do such a bad job just because it has a real sharp tip, but that tip's going to wear out super fast and it'll start really tearing it up. The DeWalt is actually reasonably sharp, but due to the nail-eating tip, it actually kind of tore up the hole quite a bit, and we can see that here. There's quite a bit of shredding. And then on the Bauer, before I drop these, really didn't do such a bad job. It's actually a pretty decent quality hole. As far as the odd rings in there, it's actually because the way I was going along the grain on this piece of old growth timber. Here's a better shot. There's the Bauer's hole. There's the DeWalt's hole. It really did kind of tear it up. And then there's that Irwin hole. And to take a quick close-up of the Bauer bit here, we can see that although these coatings, these heavily plasticized coatings do work, they just get blown away in a lot of situations. We can see the high pressure area. I mean, all the coating is gone, and just that one hole really did quite a bit of erosion. So, you use this 10 or 20 times, and I'm sure most of this coating is going to be gone through the first inch of this bit. But it still will work up on the higher portions, and did seem to clear out the chips. It's about as good as any of these others did. But these coatings can make a bigger difference if you have really sappy wood or types of wood that the chips end up wanting to stick to each other, but or just want to clog up more. Overall, I actually think this Bauer product is a much better deal than the reciprocating saw blades. This is actually pretty competitive. They seem pretty nice. It is pretty heavy duty. And this is exactly what I was expecting out of Hercules and Bauer, was products that were much better than their baseline Warrior products, but still are cheaper than just buying straight up DeWalt or Milwaukee or the premium grade bits. You know, they only have 3/8 shanks instead of 7/16 shanks, and they aren't nail eating rated, but they are still pretty heavy duty. Overall, I think the Bauer Auger bits aren't too bad at all, and they're actually a bit better than the Irwins. It's really surprising to see Irwin fall so far that Harbor Freight Bauers, which I think are around the same price as the Irwins, are actually much better. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.